We've now got about a week and change until the new Supergirl movie releases, and as such, I think it's a good time to take a break from talking about past adaptations of the character and instead turn to the comics for a look at the specific story this movie purports to be an adaptation of, because that is correct. This movie is going to be the first time since Zack Snyder's Watchmen that a DC film has been made as an adaptation of a specific comic rather than just an adaptation of the character that tells its own story and is only loosely inspired by many different comics. However, DC has already done a tremendous job of getting the word out there about that, releasing 2 new editions of it and reprinting the original trade so much since the movie was announced that I actually saw 13 copies in a Barnes& Noble a few days before writing this and putting a short ad for those versions just after their uploads of the trailer. Plus, I myself have already discussed it both during and after its original run on 3 separate podcasts in my previous life, so there's not much about the actual content of the book I can say that I haven't already, but I know some of you haven't listened to any of that and may just be here looking for a general review/recommendation, so let's do that. If you want to know my basic thoughts on the book, it's really damn good. You owe it to yourself to read Tom King and Belquist Evely's Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow miniseries. It's 8 issues, you can read pretty much the whole thing in an evening, and it requires basically no extra knowledge of the character beyond that she's Superman's younger cousin and has all his powers, which is what it was designed to be. King has said in interviews he chose to do a book about Supergirl because he was looking for characters who needed help, who didn't have that one all-encapsulating story that a fan could hand to someone and say, read this and you'll get it. And I think it works a treat as that. I've already given copies to friends, family, and coworkers, and almost all of them have come back to me and said they liked it. But that's the casual recommendation. That's the sales pitch for new fans. How do I feel as a longtime fan of the character? Honestly, this book was just such a breath of fresh air to me at the time. Coming shortly after Supergirl's Rebirth era series, which I really don't care for outside of a few scattered issues, had been canceled, and all we had were side projects like DC Bombshells and the Being Super OGN. So not only was it great to get good new in-continuity Kara content, but it was actually the first time I ever read a Supergirl comic that was written about her in the same way I thought about her. There is a moment in nearly every issue of this series that cuts right to the core of what I love about the character, while also showcasing the most gorgeous artwork of her I have ever seen, to the point that I start tearing up most every time I read them. From her final attempt to refuse Rufai's quest, to her teaching the girl to wash her hands, to how she tries to protect and later comfort her after they learn the truth about the blues and the purples, to all the vignettes of her helping people recover from attacks by the villains, to the issue-long retelling of her original origin, all the way to her final shock at possibly having not been able to teach Ruth the lesson of the book and the resolution that leads to. The only minor complaint I have after this most recent reread is an incredibly minor thing, that it uses Crypto the Superdog instead of Streaky the Supercat. But that's also not really this book's fault. That got changed up during the previous run, and now we're just kinda stuck with the public thinking of Crypto as Kara's pet for the foreseeable future because of this movie that's about to come out. I am trying to be somewhat vague about the plot details there, though, because I really do want you to read and encounter these moments for yourself if you haven't already. It is not that hard. This edition is $10 and manga size. The DC Comics reading app, DC Universe Infinite, is $8 a month, and you get that book and tons of others. Heck, there's 2 different editions of it on Hoopla right now, and that shit is free if you have a library card, at least in the US. So there's really no excuse. You can go and read it right now and come back and watch the rest of this video if you want. I don't care. Just know I'm not being hyperbolic here. This is probably my second favorite comic of all time, sitting right behind Darwin Cook's DC The New Frontier. And I am incredibly nervous about how the movie will turn out, though not in the same way some others seem to be. As with any adaptation of this nature, whether it be a book, cartoon, or Japanese kids show, I've seen plenty of fans looking at the trailers and press images we've gotten for the last few months and worrying that it doesn't look exactly like the comic, saying stuff like, why is Lobo here? Why do Krem and the Brigands look like Guardians of the Galaxy characters? They're emphasizing Kara's drinking too much, and it'll mess up her character arc. Will the blues even appear? Personally, I'm not too bothered by any of this, but I do feel the need to address it, so let's do that. Why is Lobo here? He was part of the original pitch. Woman of Tomorrow is essentially a cosmic True Grit, and King originally had him in the Rooster Cogburn role with Supergirl as Maddie. But his editors suggested changing it to have Supergirl be Rooster and an original character be her Maddie, which led to one of the comic's greatest assets, its narration, which is in universe a book written by our Maddie, the alien girl Ruth, which allows King to go on long, expository, and poetic jaunts telling of Kara's backstory and what meaning there is to her actions, while Kara herself remains a kind of woman of few words throughout. I also think we're going to see a good bit of that narration make it into the movie, because we've already seen one bit turned into a line of dialogue in one of the trailers, but I'm also hoping for some actual voiceovers by the actress playing Ruth throughout the film, but I guess we're just going to have to wait and see for that. There's also the fact that Jason Momoa is a huge Lobo fan, and people have been fan casting him as that character for literal decades. So, since he and James Gunn are friends, I'm sure as soon as the idea of working him back into the story came up, everyone realized what a perfect opportunity they had, and it all just kind of came together. And watching the trailers, I'm not upset about Lobo's inclusion at all, because he looks spot on to the comics. Not a Lobo fan unless he's fighting Superman typically, but I can't deny it seems like Momoa's having fun and Lobo fans are going to be eating well, so I'm happy for everyone involved. What about Krem and the Brigands, though? Why do they look like Guardians of the Galaxy characters? Geez, I don't know, man. Why do Guardians of the Galaxy characters look like that? Because they sure as hell look different in their comics. Oh, maybe it's because general audience have had a preconceived notion of what a lived-in sci-fi world should look like ever since Star Wars began and the downfall of culture as we know it kicked into high gear. I'm sorry, but Hollywood studios and creatives that work for them are gonna want to cater to that sort of vibe. And we have to be okay with that. Yes, in a comic, you can have space people look however you want, and it is very fun to make them look like barbarians, or classic pirates, or 50s pop art, and a great part of the comic is that Krem is just a guy who has to use tricks like hiding in grayer numbers, or a magic MacGuffin to outsmart Supergirl instead of fighting her head on. But that's not what this movie is going for. I think it's clearly trying to reach a family audience that wants to see a couple of cool characters take on hordes of nasty ones and eventually punch a lead bad guy in the face. So of course, they've moved things around to have Krem be the leader of the Brigands and make them look like the Ravagers. Just like they're emphasizing Kara's drinking and partying more than the 5 pages it's there in the comic to court an older female identifying audience who want to see a girl failure succeed. I don't think that messes with her arc that much. There's still a lot of little moments in the trailers that make me think this is still a story about people seeing the horrors of the universe, putting their weight on each other, and learning that life is about compassion, not fury. It just takes time. That's why I'm not bothered by these changes, and I think a lot of the people lodging these complaints have kind of forgotten that the main thing an adaptation needs to do is adapt. The story has to change to work in the medium it's being transplanted to. So not everything is going to be the same, but as long as the core, the soul of the story is still there and being communicated well, that's all that matters. After all, according to reports, this thing is going to be just shy of 2 hours long. When I reread the comic for this video, it took me almost 4, and I was rushing myself a little because I started later than I planned to, so not every side quest or extra little detail is going to make it in. I don't think we'll see the people of Maypole or even Comet the Superhorse appear in this unless it's part of a montage of Kara and Ruth going from planet to planet, and I'm fine with that. The book will still be there after the movie comes out. I will always have my 4 copies that I hope to one day get signed by King and Evely as long as some dumbass doesn't set my apartment building on fire. So, what I'm really worried about, what makes me nervous, is the big ifs. If this film will actually succeed or not. If this take on the character will actually resonate with people as much as it's seeming to in the lead up. If this will become the new public perception of Supergirl rather than the Arrowverse one, and if that will be enough to get people to react positively when I tell them that this is my favorite character other than just a polite, oh, okay. I'm not in this to gatekeep. I want people to love Kara as much as I do, in the same ways I do. So we'll keep getting new content for her, and more of her classic content will be treated with the reverence I feel it deserves. So, to prime you for those discussions, why don't you join me back here next week, one last time before the movie, to discuss our beginnings? Oh, and to all the chuds saying Millie Alcock isn't feminine enough and looks nothing like Supergirl, did you even read the comic? Come on! She looks just like Evely's interpretation.